All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sonia. I am Community Engagement Lead at Narika. If you haven't heard about us, Narika is a Bay Area-based nonprofit which supports survivors of domestic violence with a variety of free and confidential services. We offer helpline support, case management, wellness programs, support groups, housing and legal referrals, as well as economic empowerment programs. So as you probably know, in case the giant flags weren't enough, it is Pride Month. So we are super excited to celebrate the LGBTQ community while also still understanding and reflecting on the reality that there are a lot of struggles still, a lot of barriers, and a lot of silence around issues they face, especially in the South Asian community, which is the community that Narika mainly serves. So we are therefore hosting this event to raise awareness on the intersectionality of domestic violence and the experiences of vulnerable and visible communities, such as the LGBT community. So the purpose of today's event is really just discuss some of these intersections, share resources and stories from the community, and kind of gain some insight into the basics of being an ally, demystifying gender and sexuality, lots of good stuff. It's a lot of content, but this space is really meant to be welcoming, judgment-free, and informative. So I hope you enjoy. We have a host of amazing speakers. I will introduce two of them right away. So we have Anuradha Gupta, she, her, hers. She is a board member of PFlag Danville-San Ramon Valley. She has represented the Human Rights Commission at the US Senate for the Equality Act. Very cool, and volunteers for many LGBTQ plus organizations. She's also a writer, certified Ayurvedic practitioner, engineer, MBA, and meditator. So PFlag is the first and largest organization for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people, their parents, families, and allies. We're also joined by Himadri Gupta, she, they pronouns, a program manager at South Asian SOAR, where she oversees their survivor storytelling program and nationwide network of 30 plus member organizations, including Narika, that are working to serve South Asian survivors. As a queer South Asian woman with experience as a domestic violence and sexual assault advocate, Himadri is passionate about providing culturally competent care and empowering all survivors. Yeah, thank you all for joining. Without further ado, I'll pass it on to Anu.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, thanks for introducing me, Sonia, and thanks, Shailaja, Sonia, for inviting us here. We have other speakers down the line, but I want to get started by asking you all to take a deep breath in. Some of the content, while Pride is a celebration, some of it may be triggering. So just keep that in mind. We'll try to circle back to what is positive, what we can do. But let's close our eyes, take a deep breath in, and let go. I just want you to imagine that you are 10 and you go to school, and because of your race or ethnicity, you're bullied. Now you feel safe enough to go to a teacher or not. The teacher's understanding or not. You go home. Your family is from the same race or ethnicity. You could be biracial, but they are accepting, understanding. You can talk to them. Now imagine another layer on that. You're LGBTQ. You don't want to come out. You're bullied. You don't feel safe talking to your teacher. It could even be in your workplace. You don't come out. You go home. You don't go home to a LGBTQ family. Race, yes. Ethnicity, yes. You may or may not. Chances are you won't. Imagine how you feel. For decades and centuries, your existence, your rights have been questioned, and you're fighting for your rights, or you're just trying to, kind of live your life. Let's open our eyes. I don't want to start grim because Pride is a celebration, but I do want to create that awareness. Today, I was just reading up about intersectionality, and it hit me that an LGBTQ kid is not going back to an LGBTQ family. So can you make me co-host, so I can share my slides, Sonia?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. And yep. Please bear with me. I'm a mom, which is my excuse for.
You're doing great.
Okay, thank you. So today's theme is Pride and Prejudice. We are going to talk a little bit about Gender 101, which is a presentation that PFlag makes in hospitals, in schools. We go to, school, PTAs, and we talk about this because we want to raise awareness. I'm an ally. I want to raise awareness because racism, oppression, all of that comes from lack of awareness. It comes from biases, and education and awareness always help, right? So I thought, let me set the context. When I was born, that was the year of the Stonewall riots, when it was criminal to be transgender or non-binary or, LGBTQ. And so in New York, people were being attacked. So what happened was they started a riot. And then many years later, there was the killing, a brutal killing of Matthew Shepard, and his family fought, and they made, they helped the legislation, which was the Hate Crimes Prevention Act. And it's a fact that, even today, there are a lot of the violence in this community. It's 4 times higher than other communities. So there are a lot of laws where people can slip through the cracks, a lot more violence. There is something called the Gay Panic Defense Act. Then, of course, there is conversion therapy. And, Human Rights Commission has what is called the reality flag. In that, it shows that in 29 states, basic freedoms are missing for LGBTQ folks in America. If you talk about the world, 69 countries still ban homosexuality, right? And a lot of this is a colonial legacy. If you talk of the Commonwealth countries, like 53 Commonwealth countries, 36 of them have banned LGBTQ, existence itself. So do LGBTQ people not exist in those countries? They do. So when I had to go to the US Senate, and I thought, okay, a lot of people were talking about workplace discrimination. There were LGBTQ folks. They were talking about, things like, inheritance and, healthcare. And then there was a same-sex couple who had gone across to another state. Somebody was discriminating against their child there, and, somebody alleged that maybe the child is not there. So my story is simple. I have 2 children. And they are on this, on this presentation, and they don't have equal rights. And that's why I'm here. So why pride? Because we want to be free to be ourselves. What does ourselves mean? It doesn't mean the standard heteronormative like man, woman. There are many types of gender identities. Like when my child came out to me, I did a course on queering identities. And what I found out was that 2 in 100 people are intersex. And that community has such a high incidence of depression and anxiety. And a lot of kids, they have non-consensual surgeries when they are born or when they're little. So let's say it's like I have a lot of facial hair. When I was little, I was teased that I have a beard. And, it was with the swimmers, actually, that when they were, I think in the 60s, when they were trying to find out what their hormone levels are, a lot of people found out that they're actually intersex. Sometimes you don't even know. You may have some organs, like as your sex assigned at birth is male, you may have some organs which are female, right? Men with breasts, right? Or women with facial hair, and that sometimes people would laugh at them, right? Or, even in shows, we had people like that. It's horrible. So one of our teachers was intersex. And it struck me that, it's so unfair that we have this whole heteronormative concept. And then the freedom to love, so same-sex marriage is legal, right? But today, because there is no Equality Act, there are no federal protections. The LGBTQ community lacks equality in housing, in healthcare, in education, in employment. And we know, because those of us who have read, there have been 300 anti-LGBTQ, particularly anti-trans bills that have kind of swept the nation. And especially in the last 2-3 years, it's been horrible, right? This happened 40 years back when there was this huge propaganda about the LGBTQ community, and it's back. They're calling, affirming parents pedophiles and groomers, right? And it's really horrifying what the conservatives are doing. Now, in terms of statistics, 45% or 1.8 million LGBTQ youth seriously considered suicide last year. This is Trevor Project's latest survey. Trevor Project is a crisis counseling, nonprofit for the LGBTQ youth. More than half transgender people did. Imagine your existence being discussed daily in the media, everywhere, right? So in our talk, which will last for about 1 hour, 15 minutes, 75 LGBTQ youth will attempt suicide. And this is the second leading cause of death. So can we use our privilege to help them? I just want you to look at this slide. Just one accepting adult can reduce the chance of an LGBTQ youth attempting suicide by 40%. Can we be that adult? Can we save lives? So in terms of education, PFlag, we go to communities and we talk about, a lot of people, they say love is love in the context of LGBTQ, which is, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, even the asexual community. So that's your sexual orientation, right? About whom you're attracted to. But then there is also transgender, which is your gender identity, which is how you feel internally, whether you feel like, you have a sense of being male, female, somewhere in between, or outside the binary, right? The heteronormative concept that we have, which is a social construct. Sexual orientation is not the same as gender identity. There's gender identity, then there's expression, like how do you dress up, right? How do you, socially, how do you express yourself? And then there's sexual orientation. I like this unicorn. So, I'm just going to spend a little time. And if you people feel like jumping in somewhere, you have a question, let me know. So gender identity, like I identify as female, right? My gender expression is more feminine. My sex assigned at birth is female. I could be intersex. I don't know. I'm physically attracted to men, emotionally attracted to men, right? So this is how it is. And, we were giving this presentation with, our friend who's gay, and he was telling us about himself. And he said, my gender identity is male, and my gender expression is feminine, right? So there can be so many types of gender identities, right? As many as there are people. And as for sex assigned at birth, I think that's where so much of homophobia comes in. According to the American Association, the Pediatric Association, by the age of 4, kids know that, this is my gender identity. So I was telling my friend who's on this call, a teacher, and I was telling her about this talk, and she said, she is a primary school teacher, and there's a 4-year-old kid who wears a tutu in class, and his sex assigned at birth is male, but they are feminine. They are very effeminate or feminine. I don't know whether effeminate is the correct word. They're feminine. So there is a girl there who's really, really nasty to them and tells them, I hate you. So can you imagine at that age to carry such a strong sense of, this is how the world should be? It shocked me, right? And we actually have a beautiful book in PFlag, and a lot of you may know about this. My shadow is pink. So there is a very beautiful Indian family actually from Bengal whose child is, whose sex assigned at birth was male, and basically was dressing up, doing their nails. And so they came to us and, they asked for resources. And I just love that. They were not, pushing anything. They were not asking for anything. They were just being affirming. They were just, they were not pushing their kid to be any which way. So a cisgender person is somebody whose gender identity is consistent with sex assigned at birth. If anybody thinks that it's easy to be transgender, it's not. It's a pretty transphobic environment out there. But why do people then become, or they transition? That's because they want to be themselves, right? Now, transgender is an adjective. It's not a noun, right? Transgender, so and so. That's not a noun, right? It's an identity which is persistent, insistent, and consistent. Now, when we talk about Gender 101, we do spend some time on pronouns, on who is a trans woman. A trans woman is a woman. A trans man is a man. Somebody who's gender diverse, they have an identity which is not exclusively male or female, right? That includes gender fluid, non-binary, gender expansive. And their common pronouns could be they, them, theirs, but anybody could have any pronouns. And we respect pronouns. A friend of mine who's again in this talk wanted to know, like, what does transgender mean? Who are transgender people, right? So it's a community, the LGBTQ community. There's the lesbian community. So there's the gay community, there's the bisexual community, there's the transgender, non-binary, asexual, intersex, so this is a marginalized minority, and we are here to understand and educate ourselves. Now, some things that I wanted to say. One is respect people's pronouns, right? If you introduce yourself with your pronouns, like I was in an internship today with with clients, and just the fact that I had my pronouns on Zoom, somebody had their pronouns, she, they, and they opened up about her story to me, right? So it's very easy. Some people say, oh, it's inconvenient. How is it inconvenient? Meet Desi. They are a doctor. Being a doctor is important to them. Pediatrics is a specialty of theirs. They don't diagnose themselves. Pronouns are not preferred. They just are. So if we don't know, using inclusive language implies we say they, right? Introducing our own pronouns. And if you make a mistake, what do? It's not about you. You say sorry and you move on. Just some tips about how to be an ally. Now, gender dysphoria is not essential for people to transition, right? But gender dysphoria is, it's a very tough mental health issue where there is a great deal of distress when somebody, sorry, how do I go back? I was trying to let somebody in. Yeah, there's a great deal of distress when somebody's gender identity does not match their assigned sex at birth. And this is really tough, especially during puberty. It can generate it. People say it feels like, you want to tear your skin out. There's so much anxiety, depression. A lot of kids self-harm. And sometimes you're allowed to let them self-harm because that is their only coping mechanism. Now, imagine this. 7% of the youth in this nation are homeless. Of that, 40% are LGBTQ. So many LGBTQ youth are rendered homeless. They leave their homes. They're asked to leave. And, a lot of them have suicidal ideation, right? So gender dysphoria is very debilitating. And I just want to explain one concept, that being transgender does not mean, people are saying, oh, how can a little kid decide? A little kid knows by the age of 4, kids know what their gender identity is. Then transitioning can involve a social transitioning, which is they choose their name and you honor their chosen name, their pronouns and their gender expression, which is how they dress. They may cut their hair. They may wear certain type of clothes, right? Now, the whole process of medical transitioning is regulated, right? Before 18, you have to take parental or guardian permission, right? Then, if you decide to take puberty blockers, it's with your doctor involved, hormone therapy, right? So, and surgery normally happens only after 18. There are some surgeries like a mastectomy can be done earlier. Then there is the legal change. So there are different ways for people to transition. Some may not transition medically at all. Some may not transition legally at all, right? So it's important to know that. And it's important to respect everybody's identity because it can be life-saving for them. Now, because we say, okay, there are a lot of mental health issues in the community. There is, prolonged trauma, right? For centuries, of being marginalized. Then it's because of the stress of feeling physically or emotionally unsafe, whether it's at your home, your school, your workplace, and other spaces, right? So that can lead to physical symptoms. It can lead to, eating disorders. It can lead to depression, anxiety. It can lead to substance abuse, self-medication, self-harm, and suicide attempts. So transphobia has really debilitating impact, right? So now these statistics are depressing. I know this is Pride Month, but there's this whole concept of toxic positivity, which I learned from my kids, right? So facing reality really helps us, cause a shift. So the fact is that 50% of, kids diagnosed with depression, more than double the rate of non-transgender peers. That's the transgender peers. And I'm talking about trans folks because currently we're talking about Gender 101. We're talking about, a community here that is facing maximum number of, anti-LGBTQ legislation that's faced with so much transphobia, right? Many suffer from anxiety, many self-harm, and, compared to their non-transgender peers, they engage in risky behavior because very often, let's say if you're homeless, so there's sex work that sometimes kids have to resort to, right? And 40% have attempted suicide, nearly 9 times the rate of the US population. 93% of those did so before the age of 25. So this is what we're doing to kids when people are transphobic, right? But there is good news. I know this was heavy. This was heavy. I hope it was not triggering, but the good news is that research shows that we can significantly decrease these negative outcomes through family support, school support, work and support, healthcare support, legislation, and community connectedness, right? It can be something as simple as respecting a person's affirming name and pronouns, which can reduce their depression by up to 50%. That's all it takes. And it means so much. Okay. Now, how can we be an ally given all of this, right? We can be openly affirming. We can use inclusive language. Instead of saying men and women, we can say folks. We can educate ourselves, find out what is, like, I was so happy when, my friend called me and said, but what does transgender, mean? And can you explain this to me? So educate yourself, explore our own biases, right? That is something the BLM movement taught us. Representation matters, stories matter, like seeing people, politicians, seeing, celebrities really makes, and then reading in history, it matters so much. And then at work, DEI, non-discrimination policies, honoring pronouns, chosen names, and, identifying microaggressions and standing up against bullying. And then, not leaving the onus on explaining what LGBTQ is to LGBTQ folks who are already facing all these layers of discrimination. And then, of course, there are GSA clubs, there are support groups, even for families. PFlag is a support group for families. I belong to many other such support groups. And there is one group called Free Mom Hugs. Go to Pride, hug kids. Another thing that I want to mention is don't out people without their consent. Don't talk about them. Not all spaces are safe, and be active allies and advocates. So I just want to give a quick South Asian context. So now, sometimes we are told, about, and I'm giving specifically the Indian context example, right? Sometimes we are told that, religion is used as an excuse for homophobia, oppression, or, we are told, oh, you're LGBTQ because you have the Western influence. No, during Vedic times, there was the concept of Tritiya Prakriti, the third gender. A lot of gods would be trans, including Lord Krishna. A lot of gods were LGBTQ. Just look at the temples, right? Read some books, right? Read our epics. In fact, my guru, Gurudev Sri Ravi Shankar, actually said that how can homosexuality be criminal in a country where Lord Ayyappan is born of Shiva, Vishnu? Representation in mythology everywhere was about the gender fluid community. Homosexuality was banned by the British in 1861. And then in 2018, that ban was reversed, but society is still catching up because there were so many years of, homophobia. Now, I actually want to invite Himadri now. So Himadri, can you tell us about your personal experience? Let me stop sharing. Yes. All right. So Himadri, would you tell us your experience as a South Asian LGBTQ person?
Yeah, of course. So just to start off, I knew from a pretty young age that I was queer or a lesbian, like a lot of other queer people. Clearly, I've been blessed with very accepting, loving family and parents. For those of you who haven't made the connection yet, Anu of PFlag is my mom. So I got just about as lucky as any queer kid could get. But of course, that doesn't mean that society is as accepting, unfortunately. And even if you have the most accepting parents in the world, or even if you have queer parents, coming out and figuring out how to navigate your identity in a world that is still unfortunately oppressive as the majority is a difficult personal journey for most. Especially growing up, there wasn't much queer South Asian representation. I remember seeing my community as the butt of jokes in many Bollywood movies, as one example. And while that's slowly starting to get better, South Asian culture and society in general still feels pretty far behind. I'm really lucky now that I'm out safely and I have an amazing partner of almost 3 years, even though we still have to be careful and aware of our surroundings in public, even in a liberal place like California. And I really want to recognize and emphasize that despite my own struggles that I, like many other queer youth, have experienced, I have a lot of privilege. Privilege in my class, in my cisgenderness, in my caste, my location, and more. But I think it's just really important to note that these systems of oppression, of homophobia and transphobia, white supremacy, capitalism, etc., are not only upholding these privileges, but also the structural violence that so many queer people face. Sorry, that was a little tangent.
Absolutely. That's really valid. So, and I'm so glad, to have you as my kid. When Himadri came out, I was just so shocked that anybody would have trepidation. Does any, so-called straight person go and tell their parents, I am straight? And that made me really upset that anybody would have trepidation. So anyway, so Himadri, I have another question for you. So so you did mention a little bit about the intersectionality between, South Asian and LGBTQ communities. You spoke of your experience. Thank you, Shailaja. So do you want to expand on that? Like, maybe from the experience of other people?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit more just about the larger intersectionality between South Asian and queer communities. First off, both communities and the intersection of those communities are so vast and diverse. There is no one South Asian culture, there is no one queer experience, and oftentimes only certain subsets of these communities are centered. So it's important that we uplift marginalized voices and not just the mainstream voices. But still, it's clear that so many members of the queer and South Asian communities face so many cultural and societal stigmas, which I've seen not only in my personal experience, but also in the research and in statistics. And from my experience, I can really only speak on, queer South Asian people in the US, and especially those of first generation South Asian immigrants. But that doesn't mean that the laws and cultural attitudes from our home countries don't affect us in the South Asian diaspora. Like Anu mentioned, in so many South Asian countries, our identities are criminalized and our marriages and identities are, not legalized, and our existence is looked down upon. In my research for this talk, I found a study that was done in 2014, which showed that 85% of Pakistani people and 67% of Indian people perceived homosexuality as morally unacceptable. And I hope we've come farther since then, but sometimes it doesn't feel like it. And even here in the US, so many South Asians struggle to find acceptance in their families who often have more traditional values, which studies show make this population even more prone to experience anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts. And this population is also culturally less likely to reach out for mental health support as well. And this is especially difficult because in our communities, our families are such a huge part of our lives, even when we get older. Personally, I have queer South Asian friends today whose parents are trying to get them arranged heterosexual marriages, and who know that they can never come out to their family safely and be accepted. But that's why conversations like these are so important. I'm really glad to see that there's more events and trainings like these that are raising awareness. Even at South Asian SOAR last year, we collaborated with Desi Rainbow for our member organizations, but we really have a long way to go. And for myself as a queer South Asian person in this space, personally and professionally, I want to keep making more space for these conversations, not just around the challenges and difficulties, but also of the pride and joy of our intersectionalities.
Yes, absolutely. And, that's what we want to emphasize, that queer pride matters. I know this has been heavy, right? I know these are tough conversations to have, but I'm going to come to a tougher subject. I'm going to ask you, since, this is the space that you all are in, I want to ask you about the intersections between gender-based violence and the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, of course. I remember when I was working as the domestic violence advocate at Narika, actually, I added a section on working with LGBTQ plus survivors to Narika's 40-hour domestic violence advocate training. And before I led that training, I already knew that this was an issue that disproportionately affected my community. But even then, even still, when I did my research, I was still shocked by the statistics. First off, studies show that about 1 in 4 members of the queer community have experienced IPV or sexual assault, IPV being interpersonal violence, intimate partner violence, sorry. And multiple studies show that over half of transgender people have experienced sexual violence at some point in their lives. One study also showed that more than 60% of LGBTQ plus survivors said they were denied access to DV shelters for a variety of reasons. So it's pretty clear that the queer community is very disproportionately impacted by gender-based violence. And for queer survivors in general, they're also less likely to be supported by family or to have additional support systems. And like Anu mentioned, there are so many queer youth who are cast out by their families. And we see the cycle where they end up in abusive relationships because they're dependent on their partners. And that's just, those power dynamics are rife for abuse. Cultural abuse for this community is also a unique issue where, for example, abusers may misgender or threaten to out their partners as forms of abuse. So again, I know this is heavy, but that's why it's so important that we're having these conversations, why it's so important for advocates to be trained and for people, in their support systems and allies to be supportive and educated.
Well, I'm so proud of the work that you all are doing. It's really saving lives. It's making such a huge difference. So I want to invite another guest now. Yeah, Karthik. So let me just introduce Karthik, hi Karthik. So Karthik is a software engineer, right? No guesses, right? If you're in the Bay Area, very likely that you could be in the, a software engineer where he lives with his husband. and he's done his master's in computer science from Texas A&M University. And Karthik, you want to fill us in? Like you like yoga, fitness, and you volunteer for the Art of Living Foundation. So yeah, go ahead. Talk to us.
Thank you so much, Anu, for introducing, and it's nice to see all of you guys. It's such a nice space. I think this space is really important for people to come out and really talk about, basic rights in the society. And thanks to everybody joining this thing. And, like Anu showed the statistics, right? Just one person accepting it just creates such a wonderful space for others to open up. My personal story is just me being open about it has created wonderful space for people to come to me and then talk to me. And this is such a wonderful experience. There's many people who I've seen married people come to me and they want to be themselves, but they can't be themselves because there's so much they're in the closet. They have kids. They did arranged marriage and they're stuck in their lives, but they don't have the space to come out and be themselves. And we all need to really work for it. And we all need to, help create that space for everybody. Let's all work for it. That's all I got. Like, happy Pride.
Thank you so much. And actually, remiss of me, I didn't thank Himadri. Himadri, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud to be here with you, to share the same space. Thank you, Sonia. And so Karthik, I'm so glad that you are here, really. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay. So I just wanted to ask you that, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to come out? And you said you have people that approach you, but let's say, if there's a parent and a kid comes out, or somebody is, has some trepidation about coming out, what would you say?
I would suggest, especially kids, see if you're comfortable enough to come out. You don't have to rush it. That's really important. First is to come into acceptance that being gay is okay. Being LGBTQ plus is okay. And see if you can come out to someone whom who is very comfortable with. If not, you could wait. You don't have to hurry it. You need to really see if there is a space to come out. You don't have to hurry it and have somebody out you when you're not ready for it. So financially, I would suggest somebody who is struggling coming out, be financially stable first. If you think your family is not open to it, if you think your friends are not supporting, but there's so much out there to reach out. All you need is a phone, and there is like free lines to call and take support. And I'm really happy, Narika, and there's so many foundations out there that can help you out. And there's so many people out there. Just go find other queer people. There's so much help out there. Just don't think that it's just you. That's all I got.
Thank you, Karthik. Yeah, in fact, like finding an uplifting, accepting space, that's really important. And then there are many helplines. And then, I know PFlag has a series of helplines if you're trans, for the Trevor Project, there's the Himadri volunteers, she's a crisis counselor also. So there are all these, helplines. And I think the suicide prevention helpline will now be 988. Right, the number's changing. It was this big number, and actually the Trevor Project was involved in this change. So I wanted to ask you, Karthik, like as an LGBTQ person, how has your experience been with your family?
My family, currently, I still have my parents that are not really accepting to this idea. Just being honest, but I do have some of my cousins and I have like wonderful friends, and being a part of Art of Living family also, like I think yoga and meditation has really helped me accept myself. I would really suggest people to reach out to like Art of Living. There's so many foundations that teach yoga and meditation. I think that will help you pave a path for acceptance And yeah.
Yeah,
I
I think
still have a long way to go with my family, but I still think that let's all work for it, and then there's better days out there soon in the future, for sure.
thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. And, I really like what you said, that connection with yourself, and then a chosen family matters so much, especially to the LGBTQ community or any marginalized community, right? To have supportive friends, to have a supportive community, and to be supportive of oneself, to center oneself. And, so thank you. Thank you so much. And Sonia, I want to thank Karthik. I want to thank Himadri again. And we have a trans person, a family I worked with. So, you want to introduce them? Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so this is Kavi, who I believe introduces himself in the video. I hope everyone can see and hear. Please let me know if you can't.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Kavi. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to talk to you all about my journey as a transgender and South Asian person. So I grew up in the United States as a first-generation child of Indian immigrants. And that was already tough enough as it is, having not only that generational divide between my family and I, but also that cultural divide with us having very, very different upbringings. And when I was growing up and struggling with fitting in with my peers and discovering my identity, both in terms of my South Asianness and my queerness, I found myself wanting to distance myself more and more from my South Asian identity, growing up, wishing that I could have been different, wishing that I could have been treated similarly to the way that my white peers were being treated by their families. And I was under this impression that South Asian and Indian culture was very conservative, very unable to kind of see outside of the established norm, and that more American culture was more progressive and more open to those new ideas. But I really had to challenge myself when I went and actually learned the history and properly where some of these ideas come from. And that learning has not only taught me more about the world and the society that we live in today, but also so much more about myself as well. And what I actually learned was that rather than trying to distance myself from Indian culture, what I really should have been doing is asking myself, where do these ideas come from and where do these ideals come from? And in doing that questioning and research, I was able to find out that the kind of very strict, heteronormative, patriarchal society that we see in Indian culture, this whole culture that revolves around men getting married to women and having children and, growing their family in that way and establishing their roles in society through that way. I found out that structure, that conservative structure, does not actually come from Indian culture, from South Asian culture. South Asian culture was actually much more fluid and much more dynamic back in ancient history, with different gender roles, different queer identities that were much more broadly accepted. And it wasn't actually until European colonization, when the British and other European nations came to India and colonized in order to establish those gender roles and those patriarchal structures. And so when I discovered this, it was such a huge, mind-blowing moment for me, because something that I was trying so hard to distance myself from, which was South Asian culture, which I thought was very conservative, ended up being the thing that I actually really needed to reconnect with the most. And so in learning this history, I was able to not only reconnect with my roots, but also discover more truth about who I was and bring myself closer to my own identity, which I'm super grateful for. And so what I would say to any South Asian folks out there who still kind of believe in that patriarchal structure, in that heteronormative norm, I would challenge those folks to kind of think and question where those beliefs come from. You know, do they really come from us and our culture? Or is this something that has been forced upon us through outside forces? And in learning that history, I have learned that society is not as strict as we are led to believe. And in that truth, our identities are not as solid as we are led to believe. They're much more fluid and much more dynamic than we initially believe it to be. So I would definitely encourage everyone to question, where do your beliefs come from? Do they come from us? Do they come from outside? Do they come from you? Do they come from your heart? And really look into yourself inwards and question, you know, where do these things come from? And I think in doing so, that brings us to a more tolerant and accepting society as a whole. So like I said, thank you so much for having me here today and speaking with you all. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and happy Pride Month. I hope you all are having a wonderful, very gay month in general. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak to you all. Thank you so much again, and have a wonderful day.
Well, that was so beautiful. So I just want to share one slide, and then Sonia, then, you know, you can jump to questions.
Sounds good.
Do I do this? How do I do this? Okay. Yeah. So, you know, this is somebody who's my inspiration, Audre Lorde. She's a Black lesbian feminist, poet, mother, warrior. And she says, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. And she kind of sets that intention. I just did want to share that. And now I want to stop sharing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. At this point, I'll stop recording. And if anyone has any questions,